Imagine a time in the one who humanity was one. They did not exist borders. There were no nations nor cultural differences. Everyone spoke his same language. They worked together and shared a common purpose. Their ambition was so great that they decided to challenge the boundaries imposed by God. They did not want to be ruled from the sky. They wanted to conquer the heaven. Thus was born Babel, the city that would mark the fate of the humanity. Located in the fertile plain of Shinar, Babel was not just a city, it was the center of the world, the cradle of a powerful civilization that did not recognize other authority than the Hiss. Their leader, a man of boundless ambition, he promoted the construction of a tower that would challenge the gods. It was not a simple architectural work, it was a declaration of independence. Humanity stood on its own, same, with its own forces, without the divine help. The inhabitants of Babel were engineers, builders, craftsmen. With bricks cooked and bitumen, they raised the most impressive structure never seen before. His goal was not only to achieve her heaven, but to ensure that they would never be scattered. Together they were invincible, united, they were immortals, but they forgot a detail. The true power was not there in his hands. God observed his work and understood his intentions. He did not destroy the tower, he did not tear down its walls. He did something much more definitive. He changed its languages. In a single instant the unit was broken. Where before there was cooperation, now there was confusion. Nobody understood his partner. The work stopped, the tower remained unfinished, and the great city began to crumble. Thus ended Babel. But its legacy never disappeared. Humanity was dispersed, languages multiplied, and with they were born new nations, new cultures, new stories. However, the question remains open. Is this just a myth or a warning? Is it possible that, in our quest for absolute power, let us be building a new Tower of Babel without give us account? After the flood, the humanity looked for a new beginning. They traveled together, avoiding the dispersion, until finding a fertile and prosperous land in the plain of Shinar. There they founded a city unprecedented, a symbol of its determination and power. That city, it was Babel, the epicenter of a civilization nascent that promised greatness. They not only wanted a home, they wanted an empire. Unlike others' villages and primitive settlements, Babel was conceived with a clear purpose, the unity. Here, all the people spoke a single language and shared the same culture. There was no separate tribes nor borders. Everyone worked together to build something bigger than themselves. The objective was not only the survival, but the immortality. They believed that by remaining united, they would be unbreakable. The leader of this city was Nimrod, a powerful hunter and the first great king of the history. His name meant the one who rebels, and his eye had no ambition limits. It was not enough by founding a city. He wanted to centralize the power of the humanity, establish a kingdom where no one man depended on God. Under his command, Babel became a metropolis in growth, with paths, good layouts, adobe buildings, and an economy based in trade. But Babel was not just a functional city, it was also a center of culture and knowledge. Here, the early forms of cuneiform writing, accounting systems, and transaction records commercial. There were markets full of fabrics, spices, and ceramics. They practiced rituals dedicated to gods local, and the priests began to take a central role in everyday life. With the growth of the city, emerged the idea of building a monument that would transcend time, something that would ensure that his legacy would never be forgotten. Thus was born the idea of the Tower of Babel. It wasn't just a tower, it was the ultimate symbol of human greatness, a challenge to heaven, a declaration of independence. The architects and builders they put in progress a project unprecedented. Instead of stone, they used bricks fire, cooked, lighter and easier to handle. As mortar, they used bitumen, a waterproof material that ensured the resistance of the structure. The bases were designed to withstand an enormous weight, allowing the tower to grow ever larger. Babel was no longer just a city. It had become an ambition, collective, a testimony of the power of the man without God. But this same ambition, I would be his ruin. The plan was in march. The Tower of Babel would not only be a building, but a definitive proof of human power. They were not building a temple to worship a god. It was not a palace for a king. It was a declaration of independence, a symbol that the humanity could reach the top without need for the divine. The architects and builders of Babel worked with determination unbreakable. They knew they could not depend on the stone. Then, in the plain of Shinar, there was no mountains from which to extract it. Instead, they perfected a revolutionary technique. They made fire-baked mud bricks, much more resistant than traditional adobe. These bricks, they were uniform, easy to stack, and, above all, they could occur in large quantities. To join them, they used bitumen, a natural substance similar to asphalt, which made the tower waterproof and resistant to climate change. With this system, the construction was moving forward without interruptions. Every day, the tower grew bigger and bigger, and with he pride of those who they built. To raise the materials to the heights, spiral ramps were built around the structure. Large wooden carts, pulled by animals, transported the bricks to the upper levels. Thousands of workers formed human chains, passing the materials from hand to hand, ensuring that the construction flow never stopped. From the base, the tower seemed to touch the sky. Who they saw from afar were left amazed by its greatness. Nothing comparable existed in the world. The vision of Nimrod and his town was doing reality. They no longer feared being forgotten. Their legacy was ensured. But the tower was not only a challenge to God, it was also a form of control. As long as everyone stayed together under a same language and the same goal, no one would look for other way. No one would rebel against the unit imposed. Nimrod was not only building a monument, he was cementing his dominion over all humanity. The people of Babel believed that their greatness would not have limits, that the tower never would fall, that his civilization was destined to rule by the eternity. But the history teaches us that when man becomes filled with pride and forgets his origin, its fall is inevitable. Babel was about to discover that no kingdom built on the pride can hold on forever. Babel was not just a city, it was the center of a civilization unprecedented. Its greatness was not limited to the tower in construction. It was a place of commerce, culture, and power. The streets were filled with merchants offering their wares, fine fabrics, exotic spices, pottery, and metal tools. The artisans, they made sculptures and ornaments, while scribes recorded every transaction in clay tablets with cuneiform writing. The society, it was organized efficiently. There were leaders who managed work, priests who officiated rituals, and builders who oversaw the building of the tower. Everything was designed for one purpose only, the unity. There were no linguistic differences, neither conflicts over territories. They were all part of a same people, one and the same nation. Humanity there was reached a level of order and stability never seen before. The religion of Babel was centered on the worship of cosmic forces and deities that represented human power. Marduk, one of the most important divinities, was seen as the protector of the city. They were offered sacrifices in his honor, and the priests assured that his blessing guaranteed the prosperity of Babel. But in the background, the true faith of this people was not putting in the gods, but in Yah themselves. They believed that the tower was the proof that they didn't need anyone else. Everyday life revolved around the construction. Each inhabitant had a role in her project, already out molding bricks, transporting materials, or designing new strategies to achieve greater heights. There were a widespread enthusiasm, a feeling of invincibility. While the tower continued growing, Babel would continue being indestructible. But this success had a cost. Babel's ambition had no limits. Your desire for absolute control led to an illusion dangerous. They believed they could govern the destiny without consequences. They did not fear God or their trial. For them, the humanity had surpassed any divine dependence. What they didn't know was that their apparent stability was about to break. Confusion, chaos, and collapse were closer than they imagined. Babel had reached what no one other civilization had achieved. His unity was absolute. His growth, it seemed, unstoppable. Every day, the tower rose higher, and with he pride of its inhabitants. They believed that their work was indestructible, that their power had no limits, that no one god could stop them. The spirit of Babel had transformed into something dangerous. What began as a symbol of unity became a declaration of absolute independence. They did not want to depend on anything above them. They did not seek the help from the divine. They did not accept limits. The tower was not just a physical structure, but an affirmation of its sovereignty over the world, a clear message that they did not fear God. Nimrod, the leader of Babel, was the personification of this pride. A powerful man, revered almost as a god in life. Under his command, Babel not only prospered, but also challenged to divine order. The city operated under its own power rules. There was no room for worship of one god. Humanity had become his own idol. The elderly warned about the dangers of pride, but his words were ignored. Nobody believed that something could stop them. The idea of a fall was inconceivable. The people of Babel saw his success as proof that they were in it correct. While the tower continued growing, his dominion over the world would be absolute. But the history teaches us that every empire based in the arrogance is destined to fall. The inhabitants of Babel were about to learn this lesson from the most painful way, not through war, nor by the destruction of his tower, but by something much more unexpected. Pride had blinded Babel, and when a man rises too high, he inevitably falls. It was a day like any other in Babel. The workers were going up bricks, the architects they drew new designs, and supervisors ensured that the tower remained growing up. There was no danger signs, nor warnings in the sky. The city continued with its unbreakable rhythm, but then, without prior notice, something changed. The builders, they began to give orders, but no one understood what the workers were saying, were trying coordinate, but his words were incomprehensible. Chaos spread like a wave, shouts of confusion, arguments, looks of despair. What had once been a united city was now a disoriented crowd. The families were trying to communicate without success. The merchants, they argued, unable to close transactions. In the tower, the errors were multiplying. Bricks fell into the void, workers became angry, and the groups separated. The construction, which until then had been a masterpiece of organization, became a disaster. The leaders tried to restore the order, but it was useless. What was once a single village had now become separate factions. The confusion of languages had broken what no one army, no catastrophe, and no king had been able to destroy: the Babel unit. God's judgment did not come in the form of fire, nor of storms. It did not destroy the tower with a ray, neither reduce the city to ashes. Instead, he made the simplest, and at the same time the most devastating. It went bankrupt his communication, and without communication, Babel ceased to exist. One by one, the inhabitants abandoned the city. They dispersed in groups, taking their new ones with them: languages, their own customs, and their fragmented memory of what Babel had been. With the time, the tower was left empty, forgotten, consumed by the passage of the centuries. There was no need for a large battle, nor of one invading enemy. The arrogance of Babel was his own destruction, humanity. He wanted to defy God, and his punishment was the division. But the story of Babel did not end there. His legacy lived on in the memories of the civilizations that emerged after. And his lesson remains in force until today. When man tries to take the place of God, his fall is inevitable. The dispersion of Babel marked the birth of the civilizations. The groups that abandoned the city, they took their new ones with them, languages, their beliefs and their own interpretations of what had happened. Over time, kingdoms, empires and cultures emerged and developed in an independent. What was once a single humanity became in a mosaic of nations. The myth of Babel was repeated in different forms in several traditions. In Sumeria, in Egypt, in Mesoamerica, towers and pyramids were built with the hope to achieve her sky. The story seemed to follow a pattern. The man, again and again, trying to challenge his own limits, trying to equalize the gods. But Babel is not just a story of the past. In the today, we continue to build our own towers. The technology, the science, the globalization, they have brought closer to the humanity to an apparent unity. However, we remain divided by ideologies, conflicts and barriers invisible. Are we repeating ourselves? The same error? Could it be possible that the story of Babel not just an ancient tale, but a warning for the future? If Babel fell by its arrogance, what awaits us? The story of Babel is more than a story of the past. It is a reflection of the human nature. Ambition, the desire for power, the search for the immortality without God, are cycles that repeat themselves throughout the history. The empires have risen and fallen. Nations have tried to impose one language, one thought, one truth. And every time the humanity believed that he can reach his sky for its account, the result has been the same: division, chaos, and ruin. Today, we live in a world more connected than ever. Borders, they seem to blur. The communication is instantaneous, and the humanity keep it up toward a new era of technological unity. But the question remains in the air. Are we building a new Tower of Babel? If Babel fell when man believed he could replace God, what will happen if we commit the same thing again, same mistake? Maybe the story of Babel is not just a myth, but a warning. Perhaps its fall teaches us that it is not the unit imposed, neither the pride of the man, what makes us strong, but the recognition of our own boundaries. What do you think? Do you think Babel was just a symbolic story or a real event that changed the course of the humanity? Are we on the path to repeating our fate? Leave us your comment and share this video with someone who wants to know the truth about the Tower of Babel.